Prices on everything have gone up dramatically over the last 3 years, and nowhere more so than housing prices. If you've been in the market for a new home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 different tips to help you with managing your housing costs if you're looking for a home or even if you have a current mortgage and you're looking for ways to save money on your housing costs as a current homeowner. I have some ideas for you as well, so keep on watching. Hello, I'm Sarah Edens. I'm a finance coach, author, and wealth mindset researcher. Here on my channel, I help you unlock your inner millionaire by developing a wealth mindset and finance skills and to be able to live your dream life, because I truly believe that with the right mindset and the right skill sets around money and finances, you can live whatever life you want to. So I am here to make that possible for you. Thank you for being here. Welcome back to all of my current subscribers. If you're new, welcome. We're so happy to have you here in our community. And thank you so much for being part of the community that we're building here as we all learn and grow together. All right, so let's get into the 10 tips that will help you save money on housing costs, either as a current homeowner or a first-time home buyer if you're shopping for houses and it is not a fun time to be shopping for houses. Mortgage interest rates are still trending nationally here in the US above about 6%. And housing inventory, which means how many homes are for sale on the market at any given time, whether it's new construction or currently built homes, the inventory for those homes is at historic lows. It's about 46% less than normally that they would normally see in terms of availability in the housing market. And a lot of that is due to the higher interest rates that we've seen, that many people who bought a few years ago or maybe a decade or more ago and were able to lock in at low mortgage rate prices are not moving right now because they don't want to have to get a new house and pay more in mortgage interest rates, or maybe they sold their home and they're just renting and waiting this whole phase of the economy out. So whatever the case may be, it's definitely an interesting time to be a first-time home buyer, and I wanted to kick this off by recommending a book that I used when I was shopping for my first home. My husband and I were shopping for our first home, and this is a really great book. It's called Questions Every First-Time Home Buyer Should Ask, and I'll link to it in the description. This one is absolutely fantastic. You can see like how many sticky notes I've been putting across here. And so this will be a really good tool if you're a new home buyer and have a lot of questions. It's a little bit dated. I can't remember when this has been out for a while, but many of the concepts are still very timeless because there's a lot of just practical advice that's very timeless when it comes to home buying and going through closing and all of that good stuff. So definitely check this book out if you're needing a resource. So my number one tip for you, for all my homeowners out there, is if you currently own a home and you're looking for ways to be able to cut back on your housing costs or make a little more money, is to look around and think about if there's parts of your home that you could rent out. And first and foremost, I want to say, if you live in an HOA, which is a homeowners association, and many neighborhoods across the country have these in place, if you have an HOA, then what you want to make sure to do is check your HOA guidelines first and make sure that there isn't a restriction on renting out a portion of your home, because some communities have this where there's just no renting allowed. And so this won't be a good option for you if your HOA does not allow it. But if they do, it can be an interesting option. I know I've personally rented from a couple of people that rented out parts of their home in the past when I was first out of college and even while I was in college. And so if you have an older home, you might have portions of the home that were built during a different era when people had servants or they'd have coachmen to drive their carriages. And so the older homes often will have servants' quarters that actually can be converted and make really great individual rental properties right in your home, but they're in a separate from your space. Or in a carriage house setup, there were living quarters above the stables and the carriage house for the groom and the driver. And so that can be good. So if you have one of these beautiful big old houses that can take a lot of maintenance and upkeep, that can be a good way to kind of help have the house pay for itself, and that's something to think about. And then also, if you have maybe a mother-in-law suite, or you've got a basement with a separate entrance, that can be a really good option as well. So kind of think outside the box and be creative here about if there's different areas of your home that might be useful for a rental. I will say, if you have a home that you're just planning to rent a room out to a tenant, think really carefully before you do that, because often if you're renting a room out in your home and your tenant is going to be much more in your personal space, and they may want to share the kitchen or share refrigerator space or those kinds of things, then you want to make sure you're renting to the right person. So that's something to think about. If you have slightly more separate space, I feel like that can be a better fit sometimes than trying to rent out a room in your home. But if you get the right tenant or the right roommate, it can be fantastic as well. So whatever works best for you, but just kind of think that through in terms of how much separation will be between you and your tenant, just to give everybody some space and some elbow room that way. Or if you have a tenant you get along great with, having a roommate situation and rent a room in your, in your immediate home out might work beautifully. So do whatever's best for your situation, and always run background checks on potential tenants. Don't ever rent anything to anyone without running a background check on your tenants, because they are going to be in your space, in and out of your parts of your home, on your property. You want to make sure that you're renting to people who are safe to have in your space. Number two is if you're shopping for a home, and this kind of ties into this, if you're home shopping right now, rather than looking for just a single family home, you might look into buying one of these places that has kind of built-in rental properties already, if you will. So that's an interesting thing. Or you could look at even purchasing a duplex and maybe live in one half of the duplex and then rent the other half out. That's a pathway that I've seen a lot of people in real estate investing talk about, that's how they got into real estate investing, because the beauty of this is you only have one mortgage, but you've got two homes. You and your family live in one, and your tenants live in the other, and they are completely separate from each other. You might have a shared driveway or some shared parking out front, or perhaps even a shared garage, but you have completely separate living spaces. And so this can be a really nice option for people that are looking to get into being a homeowner, but need that house to kind of pay for itself a little bit. And that really reduces the burden then when you're paying your mortgage, because you have your rental income from your tenants that helps to pay down that mortgage faster. Or you can use that money for other things, such as investing or paying down other debts you have, whatever you want to use that money for. But my point being, it's, if you buy a single family home and you and your family are living in it, it's a net cost to you, because you're paying for your mortgage, you're paying for all the home repairs and upkeep, property tax. If you have a HOA, you're going to have HOA dues you'll have to pay every month. And so it can just start to get really expensive to own a home with all of that said. So if you can find a way to have your house make you some money, it can really be a very good idea. So look into duplexes, triplexes, homes that have old servants' quarters, homes that have a mother-in-law suite, and just kind of get creative. It's not something that I would say for most of my lifetime we've really had to think about, because home prices have been fairly low, mortgage interest rates have been fairly low, and so it's just been one of those things where people could just buy a nice little single family home and not have to then think about, well, how does my house make me money now? How do we make this all work? But today, with the higher home prices, property taxes are going up in a lot of the country as well, and then also just, the higher mortgage interest rates that we're seeing. When you put those together, home ownership can start to get a little bit onerous. It's not right for everyone. And I've actually seen some interesting economists that I follow on LinkedIn talk about this, where they said, hey, home ownership used to be maybe a better deal, but today, with all the things that go into the price of the home, the mortgage, higher mortgage interest rates, all of this, maybe home ownership isn't as good of a deal as it used to be. And they talk about personally that they're not planning to buy a home, that they're happy renting. And so it's just a really interesting thing. We're just living in different times right now. And it's certainly not unprecedented to have a lot of high interest rates, but I would say it's fairly unprecedented to have the housing prices up as high as they've been the last couple of years, thanks to everything that happened with the pandemic. So that's another idea for you. My third point is don't buy the biggest house you can afford. So this is a good one because a lot of times banks and mortgage lenders will approve you for quite a lot of money that you could take out, but it's not necessarily best for your budget or your peace of mind to borrow quite that much money. And so you may look at it and say, okay, sure, we can get approved for this much money. We technically could buy a bigger house in a fancier neighborhood, but with our budget where we are right now, we're going to actually go for something that's a little bit more of a good fit for our budget and where we are right now. Remember, you can always upsize your home. You can always even remodel if you like your home that you purchased and end up just liking it and want to stay and do some remodeling. You can remodel. You can always, if your neighborhood and community allows it, with your HOA, you can rent your home out later and upsize into a bigger house. But going the other way can often be challenging because if you buy a very large, very expensive home, even though you can afford it technically, sometimes those homes can be hard to resell because homes in those higher price points there's just not as big of a market for them sometimes, or as many people who can get approved for that kind of a mortgage or who want to spend that much money on their home. And so that's something to think about. They often don't rent out very well either, because if you think about how much rent is on a very large home, by the time people pay rent on your very large home, they could buy their own house. And so a lot of times, large homes can kind of turn into a little bit of a liability. It depends on the situation. But that's something to think about as well, is do you really what's the right size home for you? And definitely in this too, I always encourage you, do not buy a home to impress your friends. Don't buy a home to impress your family or your coworkers or that looks cool on social media pictures. Because remember, you're the one who has to pay that mortgage every single month and come up with a way every single month, no matter what happens, to pay that mortgage for the next 15, 20, or 30 years, depending on what mortgage term you get. So don't buy the house for someone else. Buy it for you, buy it for your family. Buy it for where you are right now in your life and with your budget. And remember, you can always improve on that later. It's easier to level up things later and kind of start at a more simple, basic level when it comes to housing. You can always level up later as your financial picture continues to improve and you continue to bring in more and more money. And then you'll have, in the meantime, put the equity into that smaller home. Or if you end up loving it, you can always remodel it down the line as well. So lots of options there, but I would say, generally speaking, it's much easier to start with a smaller, more modest house, especially if this is your first home, and then just kind of think about upgrading later. If you need some inspiration on that front, I would really recommend this book. You've probably heard about this book before. It's called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley. Thomas J. Stanley was a wealth mindset researcher, so I really love his work. He has several books and he passed away, sadly, a few years back. But definitely check his books out, because if you need some inspiration on how to have a wealth mindset and still live well, but get out of that trap of needing to impress people or needing to keep up with the Joneses or whatnot, he just has some really interesting stories that he tells about different wealthy families that he researched over the course of writing this book, and how a lot of times the ultra rich do not choose to spend their money on big houses or luxury yachts or luxury cars or whatever. It's a very personal choice. I think we tend, and even more so, honestly, with social media today, this book is even more helpful because there's so much pressure on us now these days to have a beautiful, luxurious, Instagrammable life. And that pressure can just get too much. And especially if it's our money we're spending, trying to have that life that we can show to our friends or show to the world, it can just turn into a lot of pressure and a lot of financial pressure. So definitely this is the best book, in my opinion, about wealth mindset. And so check this out for additional inspiration if you just kind of need a reality check about where your spending priorities are right now. He just has such a nice, easy to read book and writing style, and I just really love his stuff. This was honestly one of the books that got me inspired to get into studying more wealth mindset, because he's just so great. So I think you'll enjoy that as well. I'll link to that in the description. Number 4 is to look into all your HOA dues and regulations before buying into a neighborhood. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. So HOAs, again, they're homeowners associations, and I would really recommend that when you're looking at a neighborhood, get a copy. If this usually happens once you've put an offer in on the house, but there's no reason you have to wait that long. But try to get a copy of all of their HOA laws. They tend to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of fine print. I think our HOA documents are about 680 pages, and I have some experience with this personally because I've served on our HOA board. I've served on a couple of HOA committees. And it is, even as an HOA board member and working with all of that, there was still so much in there that was just a lot of legalese and fine print. And a lot of it's very open to interpretation based on the board members, which are 3 or more of your neighbors who get elected to serve on that HOA board. And so it's just a very interesting setup. So I would really recommend that when you're going through a home buying process that you hire a property attorney. It's a whole separate, type of, there's so many different specialties in law, but hire a property attorney. And I would highly recommend that you hire that property attorney, have them go over all the paperwork with that HOA documents and explain to you what you're looking at, because they can do that a lot faster than you can. And believe me, it's worth the money. Because some communities are really interesting, especially in condominiums and townhomes. Legally, you don't necessarily even own all the property around your house. So with a lot of townhome and condominium associations, you might not own the front yard, you might not own the side yard, you might not own your backyard. And so because of all these different distinctions, a lot of times what I've found is the HOA board members will often act like they own your home as well as perhaps some of the land around your home, and forget that they're just there to kind of represent the community. And so it can really turn into a stressful situation. So really think about if you really want to buy into an HOA at all, because they can take away your ability to rent your home out. They can take away your ability to make improvements that you want to make if they just decide that it's not in line with what they want done. And again, these documents, they're like hundreds of pages, very vague, very open to interpretation. And so it depends on who's on the board at any given time with what you'll be able to do in terms of landscaping, paint colors, improvements to your home. So just go into it with that mindset and be aware that that can be something to just be aware of, right, when it comes to buying in an HOA as opposed to a neighborhood that doesn't have one, and you might have community covenants or city rules and regulations, but it's not that really down in the weeds legal setup that HOAs have, where they're actually legal nonprofits, where they legally own portions of the property around the community. So just something to think about before you jump into that situation. And also that always comes with HOA dues. So find out what your monthly fees are going to be, because that adds into your cost of homeownership. And then think through how you feel about maybe having to deal with a lot of citations for things like if your trash cans get left out a day too long, you'll probably get a letter from your HOA telling you, if you do this again, we'll fine you. Or having to deal with, it's really interesting, at least in my state, HOAs legally have the ability to put a lien on your home under certain circumstances, which means that you cannot sell your home until they remove the lien. And there's a lot of rules they have to follow to be able to do that. But just the amount of control HOA board members have over their neighbors and their neighbor's home is really quite impressive. So think that through carefully and understand what you're getting yourself into before you buy in an HOA. One of the benefits of them is they tend to keep the communities better maintained, more uniform looking. They often are in a master plan community where you're going to have access to pools and clubhouses, maybe a golf course, walking trails. So on the plus side, your dues do go to maintaining some, of those other community amenities that you might enjoy. It's kind of like a small city if you want to think about it that way. So whatever suits you best in your personality, but be aware that that's something to think about. Number 5 is to get a home inspection before closing on your home. This will save you a lot of money in the long run. This will really keep you from buying a home with fatal flaws. So something like toxic mold infestation that's going to be a lot of times if homes really do have black or toxic mold infestations, they're pretty much unresellable, or at least no one's really going to want to buy it off of you until you've done a lot of mold remediation. It's a mess. Just don't go there. But a home inspector who's licensed will be able to kind of pinpoint all these different things and point them out to you before you finish closing on that home. And then also things like foundation cracks, other things along those lines. So a home inspection comes after you've put your deposit down on the home, but before you close. So I would highly recommend that you do that and save yourself the pain of getting yourself into buying a home that might be really tough to resell later because you missed a really crucial piece that is going to make no one else basically want to own your home after you. Very important to think through. Number 6 is to purchase a home warranty. So this is something that you can do. In fact, it was interesting when we closed on our home, it actually came with a 2-year home warranty from the sellers, which was really nice. But they don't typically cost too much, and it can be good, especially if you're just buying your home, because it can save you a lot of money on big expensive repairs up front if you've just put all your available cash into your down payment, for example, and then you move in and 2 weeks later the air conditioner breaks down in the middle of August. And so it's one thing to have the extra cash and be able to fix it yourself. It's another thing if you've just cleaned out a lot of your money that you had saved for that home. So a home warranty will offer you just an extra layer of protection on top of your homeowner's insurance, and it will help to cover the cost of repairs and replacements for big systems like that. So you can look into that and see if that's a good option for you. But especially if you're moving in a new house and you're not familiar with all the kind of quirks and maybe things that aren't all, especially the bigger systems that can cost a lot, like heating, cooling, plumbing, hot water heater, things like that. Just something to think through. Number 8 is to consider renting in a neighborhood or a community before buying there. This can just give you some peace of mind in terms of being able to say, hey, do I like the neighborhood? Do I like the neighbors? How's the commute to work from here? How's what kind of amenities do I have access to? How much road noise can I hear, or air traffic if it's near an airport can I hear? And so that can really help to save you money from buying in a neighborhood that maybe you buy and you find out later that you just can't stand something about it and end up having to rent your home out, or perhaps even sell it because there's something about it that's just really not a good fit for you and your family. And so renting in an area in a community can really help. It doesn't have to be like right in the same neighborhood, but even if you rent an apartment or a townhome in that community and then maybe spend a lot of time walking in the neighborhood that you're looking at buying in, that can be good. So sometimes just like taking a little bit of a step back and a little bit more time, especially today when buying a home is such a large investment and it costs you relatively quite a bit because of mortgage interest rates being so high. Just a really good thing to think through of how can you kind of gradually ease your way into a new area, especially if you move for work from one town to another, or you're like us and you move from one town to another because of military relocation or what have you. So it can really be very valuable to take your time, and that should really help cut back on buyer's remorse once you do purchase in an area. Number 9 is to shop around for the best mortgage interest rates you can find. So this is a really helpful one as well, and this was something that we saw huge differences in between the different banks we talked to, and then we had a mortgage broker that we eventually went with for getting our mortgage. But it is quite impressive just the gap, depending on who you talk to, of how much your closing costs might run you, how much your other, home purchase costs might run you, even the percentage rate that they're going to give you on that mortgage. So that's a really important thing to look at. So check around with a bunch of different banks and see what they have to offer. Check around with a couple of different mortgage brokers to see what they have to offer, and just go with whoever's easiest to work with and has the best prices, because it's always really important to have a mortgage broker who answers the phone and is available. Preferably if you can get a hold of them anytime over text would be even better. Because there's so much that happens during that home buying process, and it all happens so quickly and things can just change on a dime. So good communication and access to not only your mortgage broker, but also working with a really good, qualified, experienced realtor is going to make this process so much more smooth for you. So look for a realtor who's available and easy to get a hold of, and a mortgage broker who's easy to get a hold of as well and is very responsive and will get you the best price. And it'll just make your process go smoother. And then also with the mortgage situation, really hopefully save you quite a bit of money if you can get a really good deal. And you can even let people know, like, hey, we're shopping our mortgage around. And then that'll kind of put a little bit of pressure on the people you're talking to say, okay, like I better offer them the best deal, or I'm not going to get this, to be able to do business with this person because they're smart shoppers and they're shopping around. So really good thing to think about. And then number 10 for current homeowners is to make an extra mortgage payment every single month. This is something that I found out about fairly recently and started doing. Somehow I missed this in the whole new homeowner thing, but it's really impressive. I'll put a link in the description to a mortgage calculator, but there's lots of different mortgage calculators online, so you don't have to just use this one. Just Google mortgage payoff calculator. But it's a really good tool to be able to just make that extra principal only, which means it doesn't go towards the whole bulk of your mortgage with the amount that's on the loan plus all the interest. It just goes to the principal. So it's just the amount that's on the loan, not the interest. So if you just make like an extra $500 a month principal only payment, it is amazing how much money you will save yourself in the life of the loan. If you have a 15-year loan, a 20-year loan, a 30-year loan, doesn't matter. If you do these mortgage payoff calculators and just play around with the numbers, you can figure out what's that extra monthly payment that you can make that will work with your current budget, and it will help you pay off your mortgage faster. And it saved you hundreds. Well, I don't know about hundreds. In my case, it was going to save me over $100,000 if I just made an extra $500 a month mortgage payment. So it's got to be the fastest way to save yourself money that I've ever heard of, is just to be able to make that extra principal only mortgage payment on top of obviously your normal monthly payment. And it's a great way to save yourself a big chunk of change, because the faster you pay the principal down on that loan, the faster it shrinks, and then have to pay less in interest. And when you have a $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 loan, and then you're looking at your interest rates, which right now are like 6% or higher, that's a lot of money that you're potentially just giving away to the bank in interest rather than making that extra principal only payment. So definitely look into that as well. All right, well, that is all that I have for today with our 10 ways to be able to save money on home costs, whether you're shopping for a home or a couple of things in there for current homeowners as well. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments if you have other questions about this. And also, I would always love to hear from you about other topics that you would love to have me make videos about. So please let me know. And thank you very much for being here and for subscribing and liking the videos, for all your lovely comments. I so appreciate those. And I will see you again soon in my next video.